That is the only plant left alive in my house. Little Shop of Horrors, released in 1986, is a perfect movie. It's 100% ridiculous from start to finish, and it completely owns it. For reference, in making this video, I watched the director's cut. I know I've seen the theatrical release, but just not recently. And there are differences between those two movies that I will get into in a little bit. I also did see the stage production years ago when I was a kid. My dentist had this special program called the No Cavity Kids Club, of which I was a long-standing member. And there was a system of prizes related to that program that I can't entirely recall. But at one point, my dentist did give me 2 tickets to a local stage production of the Little Shop of Horrors musical. My dentist.
Son, be a dentist. You'll be a success.
So add that to the list of strange media that I consumed in my formative years. It is another bullet point under the question, how did I get this way? However, the 1986 Little Shop of Horrors movie is based on the off-Broadway stage musical. And the off-Broadway stage musical is based on a movie from 1960. And the movie from 1960 is thought to be based on a short story. Some people believe the short story in question is the 1932 story Green Thoughts by John Collier. And some other people believe that it's the story titled The Reluctant Orchid, written by Arthur C. Clarke in 1956. I have ingested all forms of the Little Shop of Horrors media, and I will regurgitate them for you now. Ew. Also, there is potentially going to be another remake of the Little Shop of Horrors movie, starring Chris Evans. Not as Seymour, but as the dentist. However, production on the movie seems to have stalled, likely due to COVID. The last I heard about it was in March of 2021. Chris Evans was actually trying to rally some fan support to help the movie actually get made. So today, I would first like to recap the 1986 Little Shop of Horrors for you and share what I love about it. And then I will walk through the 1960 movie, as well as the short stories, and one bonus format of Little Shop of Horrors that I think a lot of people don't know about. So there is something for everyone, whether you've seen the musical or seen the 1986 movie or have no idea what I'm talking about. Quick warning. Domestic violence is a somewhat significant plot point in both the musical and the 1986 movie. Domestic violence is very bad, so I just wanted to make you aware of this before we continue. Little Shop of Horrors, 1986.
Little shop of horrors, little shop of terror.
Okay, let's get into it. There is a lot to go through here. So the 1986 movie stars Rick Moranis as Seymour. Seymour is this nerdy guy who works at a flower shop on Skid Row. He is very poor and doesn't really have a whole lot going for him.
All my life I've always been poor. I keep asking God what I'm for, and he tells me, gee, I'm not sure.
Seymour has a lady coworker named Audrey who he has kind of a crush on. But Audrey already has a boyfriend who gave her a black eye.
Audrey, where'd you get that china?
When Seymour finds a strange plant during an eclipse, as you do,
There was this,
Total eclipse of the sun.
and when the light came back, this weird plant was just sitting there.
things start to change for the flower shop, which had previously been on the brink of closing. Now, people are coming into the shop to see the weird plant.
Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing that strange and interesting plant. What is it?
And they're spending money while they're there.
Well, that's an unusual story and a fascinating plant. Oh, while I'm here, I might as well take $50 worth of roses.
However, realizes that the weird plant, which he has named Audrey 2, is actually carnivorous and requires blood to survive. So Seymour begins giving Audrey 2 drops of his own blood, and the plant keeps growing bigger and bigger. And then Seymour discovers that Audrey 2 can talk.
Does it have to be human? Feed me. Does it have to be mine? Feed me. Where am I supposed to get it?
Feed me, Seymour.
And a few little drops of blood aren't gonna cut it anymore. In a strangely sexual, vine as tentacle musical number, Audrey 2 convinces Seymour that they need to kill human Audrey's abusive dentist boyfriend. Seymour doesn't actually kill him. He just lets the dentist kind of asphyxiate himself with nitrous oxide, and Seymour does not step in to save him, but he does take the body home and chop it up to feed to Audrey 2. I guess human Audrey's not the only one with great cleavage. Cause get it? He's cleaving with the axe. Yeah. But the plant shop owner saw, so he is next to go.
Wait!
Seymour's career is taking off. Magazine covers, a TV show, awards. Plus, now he and human Audrey are officially a thing. He asks her to marry him, and she says, sure.
Marry me, Audrey.
Oh, Seymour, this is so sudden.
Will ya?
Sure.
Always the response you want. Seymour tries to sneak out of the shop to run away with Audrey, but the plant catches him and demands to be fed. So Seymour reluctantly agrees, but he says it will only be meat from the butcher. So Seymour leaves to go to the store. So Audrey 2, not being satisfied with that idea, and also being a talking plant, uses the phone to call human Audrey and trick her into coming to the shop. When the plant is making the call and holds up the phone, where is the plant's ear? More weird tentacle vines, and then Audrey 2 is about to eat Audrey 1. And here is where the plot divides, because there are two endings to this movie. In the theatrical release, Seymour ends up arriving in time to save human Audrey. He electrocutes and destroys Audrey 2, and then he and human Audrey get married, and they move to a house out in the suburbs with a yard like human Audrey always wanted. But the movie still ends with a shot of a little Audrey 2 carnivorous plant smiling in the yard. But this was not the original ending of the movie, nor is it the ending of the stage production. The original ending was deemed too dark by test audiences. In the original ending, which is the director's cut version that I watched, Seymour is too late. He does manage to pull human Audrey from the plant's jaws, but she dies in his arms in the alley. And also in this version, she does find out that the plant ate both her boss and her ex.
It's true. I did it. I fed them to it.
Before she dies, Audrey tells Seymour to feed her body to the plant so that she will become a part of it, and in that way they can always be together.
When I die, which should be very shortly, give me to the plant so that I will live and bring you all the wonderful things you deserve.
And Seymour does. We get a shot that is eerily reminiscent of a wedding scene with a bride walking down the aisle, except that it is Seymour carrying the dead body of his fiancée in what would have been her wedding dress through the door and up to a carnivorous plant that is about to eat her corpse. She died the way she lived, with cleavage up to her chin. Seymour is so full of grief that he decides he is going to jump off the roof of the building, except some random dude shows up and he says that he took a cutting from Audrey 2 and he now has a little bud like Audrey 2 was at the start of the movie. He tells Seymour that his company will pay for more cuttings of Audrey 2 for them to sell, and soon they'll have Audrey 2 plants in every home in America.
Develop little Audrey 2s. Sell them in florist shops, supermarkets across the nation. Pretty soon, every household in America will have one.
Seymour realizes that this was Audrey 2's plan all along. World domination. Audrey 2 busts out of its pot and reveals a bunch of little plant buds that sing back up during a musical number where Audrey 2 reveals that it is from outer space. Seymour attempts to fight the plant, but bullets don't exactly work in this scenario. Audrey 2 begins ripping apart the building from the inside and then eats Seymour alive. The movie ends with shots of Black Friday-esque mobs just buying up tons of little Audrey 2 plants, while the chorus sings about how the plants kept growing bigger and bigger until they eventually took over. Yes, our main characters are dead, and the evil plants win. There are a number of things that I love about this movie. Like, I love that Rick Moranis is basically just shouting all of his lines.
Forgive me for saying so, sir, but has it ever occurred to you that maybe what the firm needs is to move in a new direction?
Every performance is so over the top. Like, each actor is just chewing the scenery in every shot, and I am here for it.
Get out of here. Go away. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Everybody go away. Leave me alone.
You're hysterical.
I love the little squeak of excitement from human Audrey when Seymour tells her that he named the plant after her.
I call it an Audrey 2.
After me?
I hope you don't mind.
I love everything about the demeanor of the guy who comes into the shop near the beginning to ask about the plant.
I've never seen anything like it before.
No one has.
Where did you get it?
Steve Martin is amazing as the sadistic dentist.
You'll be a dentist. You have a talent for causing things. Son, be a dentist.
Apparently, the stage musical version had more of a Fonzie vibe for the dentist, and Steve Martin said, no thank you, so he gave the character like a bit more of an Elvis twist, and I think he improvised a lot too. If you want to play the Little Shop of Horrors drinking game, take a drink every time someone says Seymour. But please don't do shots for this game, because you will die and be fed to a plant. Little Shop of Horrors, 1960. Now let's talk about the Little Shop of Horrors 1960 movie. I'm mostly going to describe the differences between the 1960 and 1986 movies, but there comes a point where their plots diverge, so I will pretty much be recapping the entire movie from that point forward. First of all, this movie is in black and white, and there is no singing. The intro to the setting of Skid Row is not a song that is performed by 3 chorus girls who reappear throughout the entire movie. It is done via narration by a detective.
My name is Sergeant Joe Fink, working a 24-hour shift out of homicide. And this is my workshop, the part of town that everybody knows about, but that nobody wants to see.
This movie has its own brand of weird. Like, there's a guy who comes into the shop to buy carnations, and the shop owner says,
"Wait, I'll wrap them for you."
No, that's all right. I'll leave them here.
Why not?
I checked, and organically grown carnation petals are edible.
Of course, what else? They are all right?
Well, I've had better.
The characters generally have the same names, they have similar personalities, although the plant gives off a real different vibe.
Feed me. You said that. You can talk. I got a talking plant. Say it again. Feed me.
I did notice that human Audrey uses the wrong words throughout as sort of a recurring gag.
Why don't you give him a chance to resurrect himself?
I give him...
Try and eat something. It'll calm your aggravation.
And I don't think that carried over into the 1986 version of the character. Seymour lives with his mom in this. She's a hypochondriac.
Have you no sympathy for your poor mother? Laughing at her and mocking her illness, and she's got one foot in the grave.
She wants him to look at her tongue at one point.
I didn't mean it.
Oh, you never mean it. Oh, come on, look at my tongue.
Ew. The origin of the plant has nothing to do with an eclipse.
I got the seeds from a Japanese gardener over on Central Avenue. He found them in with an order he got from a plantation next to a cranberry farm.
Instead of the name Audrey 2, Seymour just calls the plant Audrey Jr.
I named it Audrey Jr.
You named it after me!
Audrey Jr.'s first victim is this guy that Seymour accidentally hit in the head with a rock. Like, the guy gets hit in the head and then he stumbles into the path of an oncoming train. And I guess Seymour, collects some of the pieces and puts them in a sack and carries it back to the shop. I initially thought that Seymour picked up the guy's pieces with the intention of feeding them to Audrey Jr., but it actually seems like he did it because he was trying to find a way to dispose of the body to cover up the murder. But honestly, there's no way that this could get pinned on him. He could have just walked away. It seems like he was running around with these pieces trying to find a place to hide them, and then he just suddenly realized, wow, how convenient! I can feed these to my carnivorous plant. Fun fact, at one point, Seymour is running around with the pieces of the dead body, trying to find a place to hide them, and he opens up a hearse, and there is already a dead body inside the hearse. That was a real hearse and a real dead body. The plant owner in the 1986 version actually sees Seymour chopping up a body. But in the 1960 version, the shop owner sees Seymour feeding a foot to the plant while singing Christmas songs and crying. Another difference is that the plant shop owner doesn't actually threaten Seymour. He just talks to Seymour about the plant, and Seymour says that it's a cross between something and a Venus flytrap.
It's a cross between a butterworth and a Venus flytrap.
Venus flytrap? And what are the habits of this Venus flytrap?
He also adds the detail that Venus flytraps need to be fed about 3 times before they're full, which I didn't verify, but that doesn't really sound legit.
Well, the book says it eats insects. It eats them 3 times in its life, and then it's full grown.
Excellent. And how many times is this one eat?
It seems like you kind of have to keep feeding a plant. But anyway, that detail is enough to kind of reassure the shop owner that the shop can keep being successful without too much murder. Seymour gets a toothache and goes to the dentist. In this version, the dentist is not dating human Audrey. Seymour actually just kills the dentist in a duel with dental instruments. I'm not joking. The man who plays Seymour looks like Joey from Friends. It's just a random observation. There is a random weird patient who comes into the dentist's office. This man serves literally no purpose for the plot.
No Novocaine. It dulls the senses.
This is gonna hurt you more than it is me.
Oh, goody, goody, here it comes.
He is a masochist who loves coming to the dentist in exactly the way that you would expect. And Seymour has to pretend to be the dentist since he killed the real dentist.
Oh my God, don't stop now!
We also meet the detective narrator guy. 40 minutes into the movie.
How's the wife, Frank?
Not bad, Joe.
Glad to hear it. The kids?
Lost one yesterday.
Lost one, eh? How'd that happen?
Playing with matches.
Well, those are breaks.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh God. The jokes between these two movies are very different, but the tone is entirely the same. Seymour asks Audrey on a date, but since he doesn't have any money, he says, "Hey, why don't you come to dinner at my house? My mom's a great cook."
Idea. We can eat dinner at my house. My mom's a great cook.
Well, that's swell.
Oh, boy, I'll call her later and tell her.
And they do, in fact, have the date with his mom.
You think they're getting married?
Well, he hasn't asked me yet.
Who hasn't?
Seymour.
Seymour's too young to get married.
And she is not a great cook.
I kind of like this chow mein.
If it tastes a little bitter, it's because it's made of Chinese herbs and it's flavored with acromyas and Epsom salts.
In this movie, the plant shop owner is guarding the plant to make sure that it does not eat anybody else. Except while he's there, a man comes in to rob the store, and the plant shop owner tricks him into getting eaten by the plant. Seymour and Audrey get into a fight because they're about to kiss, but the plant keeps audibly demanding food. And Seymour, so that way she doesn't realize the plant is talking, has to convince her that it's actually him.
Feed me.
What'd you say?
I was just kidding.
I'm hungry.
Seymour.
I didn't mean it.
The plant then hypnotizes Seymour into going out to find it food.
Now you will do as I say. Do you follow me?
Yes, master.
And Seymour seems to be actively pursued by this woman who I believe is supposed to be a prostitute. And Seymour, in his hypnotized state, thinks that the woman is volunteering to be eaten by the plant.
Master would like more fat.
Are you interested, or are you just wasting my time?
I never thought anybody would volunteer. Do you volunteer?
Sure I do.
And he also accidentally hits her in the head with a rock. So he brings her body back to the shop to be fed to the plant. So the next day, Seymour is supposed to receive some sort of award from a society of silent plant observers. Everyone gathers in the shop waiting for the award presentation, and they are also waiting for some buds on the Audrey 2 to finally open. And when the buds open, they reveal the faces of all of the people that Audrey Jr. has eaten. I mean, they're crappy paper mache, but this lady faints. The detectives realize that Seymour killed all those people, so they chase him in a scene that goes on way too long. They narrowly avoid a band of roving children, and Seymour finally eludes them by hiding inside a toilet in a toilet junkyard.
You wouldn't find him here with the toilets. Let's go back.
Seymour decides that this has to end, so he goes back into the shop and climbs right into the plant's mouth, holding a knife. When everyone else gets back to the shop, they see that the plant is now either dying or dead, and then a new bud opens with Seymour's face.
Seymour!
I didn't mean it.
So, as you can see, the two movies are exactly the same and yet completely different. They also did principal photography for this movie in 2 days and 1 night. That is insane. As I mentioned earlier, there are several sources floating out there that say that this movie was based on a short story. Either Green Thoughts by John Collier or The Reluctant Orchid by Arthur C. Clarke. However, all of those sources aren't super legit. They're either wikis or WordPress blogs. I couldn't track down anything where the actual screenwriter says that those stories were his inspiration. In most interviews, he just kind of talks about all of the ideas that he had that were shot down before Little Shop of Horrors finally got approved. So it doesn't mean that there wasn't an interview at some point in time where he said that he was inspired by a short story, but I couldn't find it, and he doesn't really seem to give credit to anyone or anything for this idea. But before you make up your mind, let's talk about the short stories. The Reluctant Orchid tells the story of Hercules Keating. And the text actually spends a lot of time telling us how small and weak and unpopular he is. Like, the story gives us his exact height and weight. 4'9", 97 pounds. His only friends are plants. The story also details his 6-foot-tall, very overbearing aunt who Hercules has come to strongly dislike. One day, Hercules acquires this weird little plant that seems to rapidly grow bigger and bigger. It also develops these tendrils, and when Hercules gets too close, the tendrils seem to move towards him in a way that indicates hunger. So Hercules goes to the library to read the story The Flowering of the Strange Orchid by H.G. Wells. And because I'm not far enough down this rabbit hole, I decided to look up that story too. It's another tale about a sad little man who acquires a weird plant that turns out to be carnivorous, and it attaches to him, drinks his blood, and almost kills him, except that he is saved by his housekeeper. And in the end, he's just pleased he had an adventure. Okay, back to the Reluctant Orchid. So, Hercules actually does call the plant tendrils tentacles, which I feel is appropriate. He feeds the plant a piece of meat, and when the tendrils reach out and wrap around the meat, Hercules is startled, and we get this line. "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat!" yelled Hercules. It was very seldom indeed that he used such strong language. Hercules is very pleased with his gardening skills, and he develops a complex system of ropes and pipes so he can feed the plant without getting too close. And as the plant continues to grow bigger and bigger, it needs more and more meat. His overbearing Aunt Henrietta is very disdainful of his plant hobby. And she does things like blow cigar smoke in Hercules' face. He really begins to dread her visits and has these recurring thoughts about poisoning or murdering her. So of course, when his plant gets big enough, he begins to hatch a plan. He starts to train the plant to really just flail its tentacles around and go crazy anytime there is meat somewhere in the vicinity. He also hears the plant making these little high-pitched noises, and Hercules feels that he is just too kind and gentle to go out and catch an innocent animal to try feeding to his plant. so of course his Aunt Henrietta just has to be the first victim. So he starves the plant for 2 weeks. And one day, during Henrietta's visit, he tells her that he has something to show her in the observatory. So he leads her into the dark room, guiding her closer and closer to the carnivorous plant. And then he turns on the light. It takes a few seconds, but the tendrils begin to move, and Hercules is just like, yes, this is it. And then the plant screams and wraps its tentacles around itself because it's afraid of Aunt Henrietta. And Henrietta chastises Hercules because if the plant is this afraid, it's probably because he was being mean to it. She begins to see the plant as something of a pet and starts actively taking care of it. In fact, Aunt Henrietta starts coming around multiple times each week so she can take better care of the plant. The plant is super happy, Henrietta is super happy, and Hercules basically just sinks into a deep depression. The end. The Reluctant Orchid was written in 1956, so let's talk about the story Green Thoughts, which was written even earlier in 1932. In this story, a man named Mr. Mannering acquires a weird little plant from a dead friend, and the plant isn't really doing too well, so he starts to study it. This plant also has a bunch of little tendrils. Tendrils seem to be a very important component of man-eating plants. After a while, the plant develops these little buds that look like fly heads, which Mr. Mannering thinks is weird, and he wonders if it's some sort of evolutionary tactic to help draw in flies for food. Then a cat goes missing, and a new bud appears on the plant. And then his cousin Jane goes missing, and a new, even larger bud appears on the plant. When the first bud opens, it looks just like the missing cat. And when the second bud opens, it looks suspiciously like Cousin Jane. And he is so startled that he can't even run. So the plant tendrils grab him, and the plant consumes him too. But the story isn't over. We continue to get Mr. Mannering's perspective as a plant bud. His mind is still there to a degree, but he can't really speak or write or communicate. Eats a bee at one point. Then his lawyer and his nephew, and the nephew has been previously described as kind of a selfish, nefarious character, come into the room and proceed to talk about Mr. Mannering's disappearance. When the lawyer leaves, the nephew is basically like, "Ha-ha! All of this is mine. I hope the old man never comes back." And he begins to make himself at home, drinking and smoking cigars. And the buds of Mr. Mannering, Cousin Jane, and the cat are all conscious and aware during this time. The cat even tries to go after a mouse. Eventually, the drunk nephew spots the cat bud, and then he notices the Cousin Jane bud, and he somehow realizes what has happened. But instead of being horrified, he laughs and actively looks for the Mr. Mannering bud. And when the nephew finds him, he taunts Mr. Mannering and blows cigar smoke in his face. I'm noticing blowing cigar smoke in someone's face is another trend in these stories. Then the nephew, actually rather smartly, decides to put some distance between himself and the plant until he can figure out what the deal is and what's going on here. So basically, Mr. Mannering is just kind of forced to watch as his nephew makes a mess of his house and drinks all his alcohol and just blows through his money. Then the nephew finds a letter from Mr. Mannering to Cousin Jane, and the letter talks all about how awful the nephew is and how Mr. Mannering wants to cut him off. And the nephew is enraged. He grabs a pair of scissors and basically says, "Oh, you wanted to cut me off? Well, two can play at this game." The last paragraph reads, "Among fish, the dory, they say, screams when it is seized upon by man. Among insects, the caterpillar of the death's head moth is capable of a still small shriek of terror. In the vegetable world, only the mandrake could voice its agony. Till now." So basically, the nephew cut the people buds off the plant while they screamed. End of story. But this particular story, Green Thoughts, does seem to bear a strong resemblance to the 1960 Little Shop of Horrors movie, particularly the plant buds that appear with the faces of the people that the plant ate. The tendrils seem to be another common theme throughout all of these variations. And another recurring plot point is the fact that in each of these iterations, the plant is able to vocalize in some way. It does seem pretty feasible that one or both of these stories did in fact inspire the 1960 Little Shop of Horrors movie. But it also seems like the idea of someone accidentally growing and then getting eaten by a man-eating plant is a recurring trope of some sort, considering that Arthur C. Clarke even referenced a very similar H.G. Wells story. It's just a Russian nesting doll of carnivorous plant media. Bonus content! There was a Little Shop of Horrors cartoon called Little Shop that aired in 1991 and lasted for 13 episodes.
Right, it's time for me to bust a rhyme, so sit back and chill for a while. I'm coming at ya like Toon style, so get ready for a funny bone overload at the Little Shop. Yeah, boy!
It is, of course, a little bit different from all of the narratives that preceded it. The characters have all been aged down and are teenagers. Audrey, too, is just called Junior and is not an alien, but is in fact a seed left over from prehistoric times. Junior is still a carnivore, but is friends with Seymour and tends to look out for him. Let me read you a few episode descriptions from Wikipedia. Episode 2, Real Men Aren't Made of Quiche. Seymour joins a home economics class where he and Junior conspire to make a human-plant hybrid a la Frankenstein. Meanwhile, Audrey decides she wants to be a refrigerator repairman. Episode 3, Back to the Fuchsia. A trip to the Skid Row Museum of Uninteresting History inspires Junior to travel in time to warn plants about the rise of the dinosaurs and keep his place in the food chain. Episode 6, I Loathe a Parade. Seymour brings home a female Venus flytrap, which Junior falls in love with. And then this is the last summary that I'll read. Episode 9, It's a Wonderful Leaf. A Reaper shows Seymour a future where the Mushnicks own a yogurt shop. Payne is winning awards, and Seymour is a politician. Meanwhile, Junior dreams that he runs a hotel for flowers. I think the cartoon wanted to be weird. Like, that was the intention of the creators when they made it. And I think they succeeded. This was originally just supposed to be a video about the 1986 Little Shop of Horrors movie. A simple little project, but it rapidly grew into something completely out of my control. A surprisingly large, all-consuming endeavor that I could only feed into, until it became so large that I had no choice but to give in to its demands. Anyway, please subscribe. Do you want to see a Chris Evans remake of Little Shop of Horrors? Do we collectively, as a media-consuming public, want this? I was kind of meh about it until I found out he was playing the dentist, and then I thought that that could be fun. If a carnivorous alien plant were to appear before me as a small bud that I would have to care for and help thrive, I think I think planet Earth would be pretty safe.